Only a day had passed since the most insane experience of Luke and Nora's life. After climbing up into a magical tree that shrunk them down to the size of peanuts, and then meeting a chipmunk and a garden gnome, and then getting chased all over the yard by a giant killer snake, they thought they had seen it all. Unfortunately, there was much more to the story, because that giant snake was still out there. Even though they thought they had gotten rid of it, that snake was on its way back to their house, and it would show up when they least expected it. The next day, Luke and Nora were swinging on the swings in their backyard, when all of a sudden they heard a tree get knocked over behind them. Well, that was unusual. And so they turned their heads and they saw a giant snake, the size of a school bus, looking at them as it was hungrily licking its lips. Both kids screamed and started running as the snake quickly slithered after them. They jumped on their bikes and put on their helmets, and they pedaled as fast as they could all the way down to the neighborhood pond, but they couldn't outrun that snake. When they got to the pond, they jumped off their bikes and dove into the water with their helmets and clothes still on, but it was no use. They couldn't even hardly swim with all those wet, heavy clothes on, and they were starting to sink. They couldn't even hardly breathe. And just when Nora thought she was about to drown, she felt something grab the back of her shirt, and it pulled her out of the water and then set her down on the grass. And with her eyes and her mouth still full of water, she was gasping and choking, and she couldn't see anything. But all of a sudden, she could hear Luke coughing as he dropped down right next to her. And when they finally had a chance to breathe normally and open their eyes, they saw the giant snake sitting right in front of them. Did that snake just save their lives and pull them out of the water? Why would he do that if he was just going to eat them? And they looked up at the snake, and he actually looked kind of nice. And if they didn't know any better, they might have even guessed that he was smiling at them. Even though the snake was huge with giant, sharp teeth, he didn't really seem that mean, and he certainly wasn't acting mad. And so Luke picked up a stick and threw it out in the woods, and when he threw the stick, the snake went and grabbed it and brought it back. The snake was trying to play fetch. And Luke said, "Snake, are you nice?" And the snake looked at Luke and smiled and nodded his head. It turned out the snake had never been trying to eat them in the first place. He certainly looked scary, but all he really wanted was a friend. And this was a problem because every time that snake tried to make friends with other animals and creatures, they would run away and it would hurt the snake's feelings. So Nora said, "I think we need to give the snake a name. We should call him Drake. Drake the snake." And she said, "Here, Drake, can you give us a ride back to the house?" And so the snake let them jump on his back, and then he gently picked up their bikes in his mouth, and he took them all the way back home. And the kids thought, well, now that we know Drake isn't mean, what should we do? And then they looked up at Drake, and they saw that he actually had a tear in his eye. He was crying. Luke said, "What's wrong, Drake? Are you okay?" You see, Drake didn't want to be a giant, scary snake. Everyone was scared of him, and he couldn't make any friends, and he couldn't even fit in his home in the ground because he was so big. And Luke and Nora said, "We need to get you back to your normal size. You'll be a lot more comfortable that way. Come on over here and wrap yourself around the shrinking tree, and we'll help you get back to normal." And so Drake slowly slithered up to the tree, and just like they told him to, he wrapped himself around the trunk, and then instantly he shrunk back to his normal size. And the kids ran up to Drake, and they could tell he was so happy. And Drake wasn't crying anymore. Now he had a great big smile on his face. Luke and Nora picked him up, and he crawled all over their arms, and they laughed and giggled. And from that day on, the kids would always meet Drake the snake in their backyard every day. And they introduced Drake to David the gnome and Chippy the chipmunk. And then they all knew what a good and nice snake Drake was. And every time Drake needed a friend to play with, he knew exactly where to go. And Drake was never lonely or sad again. Do you ever find yourself wondering when the next episode is going to come out for the Storyland podcast? I know they don't come out as much as we all want them to, but if you want to be the first to know about when the next story is going to drop, all you got to do is follow us on Instagram or Facebook, or just go to storyland.show, and you'll find links to all the different places online where you can listen and watch, and even leave a comment and make suggestions about other story ideas that you might have. Just go to storyland.show, or again, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Just search for Storyland, all one word, podcast. Storyland Podcast, and you should be able to find us there. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.